Hello, happy Friday. I'm Vincent Atchity, President and CEO of Mental Health Colorado. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to Mental Health Colorado's Legislative Education and Advocacy Day. This is our 26th annual LEAD event, and we're grateful to have all of you with us virtually. Whether you're watching through Facebook Live or Zoom, for the next hour, we'll be united with other allies for mental health and for a strong start for all of Colorado's children. Before we get started, I want to give a special thanks to all our sponsors. Our presenting sponsor is the Piton Foundation. Our leadership sponsors are Otsuka, Johnson & Johnson, Health One, and Pfizer. I also want to give thanks to our staff, especially our communications and event planning staff, and our board of directors. We're so excited to bring together community partners and advocates for a strong start for all Colorado's children. Preventative care and healthy growing and learning environments are central to ensuring healthy minds and bright futures. This year, Mental Health Colorado champions several bipartisan bills to support a strong start for all children. House Bill 1053, Supports for Early Childhood Educator Workforce, will enhance the early childhood workforce. And House Bill 1312, Behavioral Health Training Requirements Educator License, will prepare teachers to support their students' ongoing mental health needs. The success of our advocacy depends on our partnership with our state-elected leaders. We are so grateful to Senators Tammy Story, Brittany Peterson, Nancy Todd, Dennis Heisey, and Representatives Emily Sirota, James Wilson, Daphne Michaels and Janae, Brianna Tatone, for their hard work at the Capitol during the longest session in state history. We appreciate all of you for joining us today. Your support enables us to promote mental wellness, end shame and discrimination, and ensure equitable access to mental health and substance use care. With that, I'm going to turn things over to our host for the hour, Jordan Chavez. Many of you will recognize Jordan from 9 News, where he has brought mental health to the forefront since joining the station in 2017. He also shared his own mental health journey with viewers, and he is a great ally of the organization, our mission to achieve healthier minds across the lifespan for all Coloradans. Let's welcome Jordan Chavez.
Hey, Vincent, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I'm so happy, though not at all surprised, that Mental Health Colorado found a way to make this work. You know, I know a lot of our lives have been placed on hold because of this pandemic, but one thing that we all know to be true is that our mental health and our struggles with our mental health seem to be skyrocketing because of this pandemic. And as a person who suffers with severe anxiety, I'm so lucky and blessed to have support and help at an arm's reach. But, you know, I know that's certainly not the case for many, many people across the state of Colorado and across the country. So that is why I'm so honored, and it's such a privilege to even be the smallest part of this conversation, which is so important today, which is why I want to keep things going. So in just a few moments, we're going to hear from our experts who work every day to create a strong start for all of Colorado's children. But before we get into the panel about Colorado's youth, we're going to actually want to hear directly from the kids, the voices that really matter in this conversation. So Mental Health Colorado has asked young people all across the state what mental health means to them. So throughout the program today, you're going to be hearing some of our youngest Coloradans ask the question, why does mental health matter? And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Colorado's youth.
Health means to me is because you can just talk about your feelings and talk to adults, and it's really important to do that. So just why not do it?
Hi, my name is Maria. I'm from Parker, Colorado, and mental health is important to me because, in my opinion, it is just as important as physical health. Mental health can give you the tools to love yourself, the people around you, and the life that you're living. In my generation, a lot of people are battling some form of depression or anxiety, and it is important to know the tools to help yourself or others around you.
I don't know that much about mental health. I would just say it calms you down if you do it, whatever it is.
Hello, my name's Harper and I live in Denver, Colorado. I've lived with obsessive compulsive disorder for 15 years. So when asked why does mental health matter to me, it's because it's affected every aspect of my life.
Mental health matters to me because if your mind wasn't healthy, it would be hard for you to do school and stuff. And to keep your mind healthy, you should do stuff that's good for it, like reading and not playing video games too much. And it's okay to do video games a little bit, but you should definitely read more.
Hello, my name is Tatiana, and I'm from Denver. Mental health is essential to me because, as a teenager, I feel as though I have to hide my depression and anxiety from my teachers, parents, and peers. Concerned that they will either make fun of me, claim that I'm faking it, or tell my situation isn't severe enough for me to talk to any counselors. I feel like this is not an appropriate way to handle teens' mental health, as it can lead to them harming themselves or people around them. This is very important as in the past few years, school shootings and suicide rates have increased significantly due to the lack in support of mental health at schools and the stigma around mental health.
Why mental health matters is because it helps you learn at school and it helps you be active and it helps you with your friendships and it can also help you be yourself.
I think if we learned anything from that video, it is that kids certainly know what is happening, and they may not always be able to put a name to it, but they know what they're feeling. You heard them say what's important to them, that it's important that we talk about our feelings, that they talk about their feelings with people who understand them, that it helps them love themselves, that it can calm them down, and they understand the importance of keeping our minds healthy. And with that, I want to go ahead and introduce the panelists that we have here with us today, and let them share a highlight of what they are doing to really support mental health in their school district or association. So with that, I want to go ahead and have Dr. Wilson start and introduce herself.
Good afternoon. Bill Wilson, school superintendent here in Brush, Colorado, a small community of about 5,500 in eastern Morgan County. 32 years as an educator and actively seeking solutions and supports for our students. As you noticed on the video, mental health every bit as important as physical health and spiritual health as well. Excited to be here.
And we're excited to have you here, Dr. Wilson. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. Dr. Steen, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Carolina Steen. I'm an assistant superintendent in Cheyenne Mountain School District in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I have the privilege of overseeing all the student services in our school district to include mental health services, and I couldn't agree more with Dr. Wilson. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Steen. Ms. Omurade, could you introduce yourself and maybe provide a highlight for us as well?
Sure. I'm Jessica Omurade. I'm the Director of Mental Health and Counseling for Aurora Public Schools. I work to support all the school psychologists, social workers, and counselors to make sure that our students are getting everything they need, including mental health support and social emotional learning. Very excited to be here. Thank you.
Again, we're excited to have you here too. And then another important voice on today's panel is Ms. Hudak. Hi, Ms. Hudak. Oh, do we have her? Ms. Hudak.
I had to unmute. I'm sorry.
Technology, right?
Yeah. Oh, gosh. I should know better. I'm Evie Hudak. I'm the Public Policy Director for Colorado PTA. The mission of PTA is to make every child's potential a reality by empowering families and communities to advocate for all children. We do this through advocacy, education of families, and collaboration with community efforts.
I'm now having trouble unmuting myself. Ms. Hudak, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm so excited for this conversation. It's my favorite time every year because these are so important. So with that, I want to go back to Dr. Wilson for my first question, specifically regarding the Brush School District. So Dr. Wilson, recently, Brush School District has implemented mental health screenings. And I wanted to ask if you could tell us a little bit more about universal mental health screenings and what has been the greatest benefit of those screenings for your district?
Well, we use a universal health screener, and it's a tool that's used to identify students with what we call Tier 2 and Tier 3 behavioral challenges, social emotional issues, and it helps with early identification of mental health concerns. It's a helpful way to identify students that may exhibit internalizing behaviors that typically fly under the radar. So if they might just be loneliness, they may be withdrawn, there may be unexplained physical symptoms, and this helps us to identify that. So the goal of universal screening is to make sure students receive the social emotional support that are needed in order for them to have a chance at academic success. Last year, we used the DESA tool, and for those that aren't aware, that was developed by the Devereaux Center or Institute, and that's essentially what it is. It's a student strengths analyzer, and what we found was nearly 1 in 5 of our students were found to be in need after implementing the mini screen. So those students were screened again with the full DESA screener, and 75% of that initial group were still rated as in need. So just like you noticed from the student video, it's an issue, and the pandemic hasn't created the issue, it has just exacerbated the issue and brought a greater awareness to it. So what we did was last year, after conversations with our teachers and parents, those students were either placed in small group, referred to our district counselor or therapist, or referred to a community mental health agency if the parents consented and could do so. And so there were a few students that were already receiving special ed services or therapy, so we didn't refer them elsewhere, but our plan was just to make sure everybody was receiving some sort of support. And then obviously we had additional plans after spring break, and we had the longest spring break in the history of our school district. So here we are.
In the history of any school district, really, right, Dr. Wilson? I mean, you're right.
I think so.
Right to the situation. Thanks for your input there. Dr. Steen, as Dr. Wilson was just mentioning, the support that really plays in kids' lives. So I wanted to ask you, for the Cheyenne Mountain School District, what roles do families play in school mental health within your district? And how have families really been helpful?
Yeah, sure, thank you. So unfortunately, in our school district and many others, we experienced the death of a student by suicide, several. And we're a really close-knit community, kind of a small district. And those kinds of tragedies really bring people together. And so the district went ahead and adopted the Signs of Suicide curriculum and felt like the only way that we could implement this with great fidelity was to include families. So we opened that up, our introduction session to families. And we had a decent turnout, but felt like we needed to do more to make sure it was a community-based intervention, not just a school intervention. So we reached out to faith-based entities in the community, and anyone that would welcome me to a service. I went and talked about the program and what the different efforts that we were doing in our school district, so that we were all on the same page and speaking the same vernacular when it came to things.
Hey, Dr. Steen, I apologize. I don't mean to be rude or interrupt. What you're saying is super important. I want to make sure that we can all hear it. So I was wondering, by any chance, if I don't know if we can adjust the mic volumes or anything there, or lean a little bit closer. We might have to do one of these weird, awkward lean-in things. Yeah. But I want people to be able to hear what you're saying because it's important for sure.
You bet. So I will try to speak louder, George. So we adopted this curriculum, and we went out to our faith-based entities and just asked if we could be part of their services so that we could reach out to families, since we shared the same customer or client, if you will, which really brought families more into the loop around some of the efforts that we were creating. One thing my Board of Education does, which is kind of unique, that they go out to every faculty in the buildings and have either breakfast or lunch with them and ask teachers, what is the thing that is the thing that you are challenged with the most or that you celebrate the most? And a few years ago, it was very clear that mental health issues were permeating everything they did instructionally. So our school board put a lot of resources into a grassroots social work model, which we use in the school district, of really triaging families and making sure they have access to mental health resources. But also we went ahead and trained all our teachers and opened it up to communities, to churches, and to families around mental health first aid and trauma-informed care, which really brought people together. And from that, we formed a mental health team comprised of community members and families, parents. We have about 30 of them, and this group has existed for about 3 years, really giving us good feedback about what are our efforts, what we're doing, and a sounding board as to how we could do better. So those are kind of some family-related initiatives in our school district, and I will continue to speak loudly.
We appreciate that, Dr. Steen. Hey, 2020 right now, we're all doing our best just to figure out what we're even doing. I have to remind myself what my name is and what day it is constantly. So thank you very much for that, Dr. Steen. Jessica Omurade with Aurora Public Schools. My next question is for you, and I want to talk specifically about how Aurora Public Schools has recently transformed the school mental health strategy and what the primary focus of that new strategy is, if you don't mind.
Sure. So what we did was we kind of transformed what we were doing on a smaller scale starting about 5 years ago, and we took what worked with that, ran a mill, and passed a mill on mental health. I mean, it was the foundation of that mill was mental health, which is pretty spectacular. And we were able to expand those services to not just students with disabilities, but to general education students as well. And we're really looking at implementing over phases. And we're really using the neurosequential model in education out of the Child Trauma Academy and Dr. Bruce Perry's work as our philosophy, our underpinnings, and focusing on biologically sensitive and developmentally relevant programming practices, structures, and philosophy. We're doing first access, making sure that every student has access during the academic day. We do that through the providers that we hired and also our partnerships, specifically with Aurora Mental Health and Health One. We have school-based therapists from both of those practices, so there's a therapist in every school. We're also looking at then programming, so vetting and making sure that our SEL and mental health curricula go through the same process as our academic curricula, really making sure that our community is part of that and we're using curriculum that was designed to support the population of students that we're working with and supporting. And the ultimate goal is to have a comprehensive behavioral health team in every building. That includes training for all staff, intense training for our behavioral health care providers. And here's the big one, the very exciting component of it is really our sustainable wellness program and making sure that all of our staff have what they need to care over the course of a career without burning out. It's exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I appreciate the jazz hands and everything around that very much. Thank you so much. And another part of the important part of the community, of course, and where the support, a lot of support comes from, is our PTA. So, of course, my next question is for Ms. Evie Hudak with the Colorado Parent Teacher Association. And Ms. Hudak, that is, you know, what role does the PTA play in supporting mental health for students? There's that darn mute again.
As I mentioned before, we have three things: advocacy, education, and collaboration. So we do a lot of advocacy for the availability and funding of early identification and interventions, preventative treatment services, school behavioral health staff, educator training, and comprehensive health education. We work to educate our families to help them understand child emotional health and mental health needs, the effects of trauma, the importance of a good school climate to be conducive for good mental health and learning. to strengthen the understanding and create a supportive home environment for children's mental health, to reduce the stigma of mental health. And we also do a lot of training and education on suicide prevention. For example, we put on QPR workshops. I don't know, some of the other presenters are nodding their heads, so I hope people have heard about QPR. And then we collaborate with the community and partner with other associations and agencies. And finally, we ask each PTA unit to have an advocate for health, wellness, and safety who can act as a liaison to the state PTA Health, Wellness, and Safety Committee.
All right, Ms. Hudak, thank you. I actually want to open up a question for the entire panel now, a series of questions, and we'll start with Dr. Wilson. But the question for all of you is, what really brought you to recognize that supporting mental health is so important to either your district or the association you're with? And Dr. Wilson, again, we'll start with you.
What really brought it to my attention was just the fact that it's been there, and I don't know if it was intentional. I don't believe it was, but schools are expected to do so many things. But even as early as 7 to 10 years ago, we should have been seeing the signs. And in certain places, some of these interventions have been starting to take place. But as was mentioned earlier, that one of the key words there is stigma, and the idea that if you have a twisted ankle, everybody looks at you and says, yeah, you probably ought to be limping. And yeah, that was a horrible, collision or whatever happened. But if you're having an anxiety attack, or if you're dealing with depression, it was kind of a get over it, get tougher, you're faking kind of a thing. And we didn't necessarily address it in a healthy and respectful manner. And so to me, that's been the start of where I was involved with it, was to acknowledge that this is real. It's been real for many decades, and it's becoming more and more prevalent and prominent in our younger people. And we need to address it early and let them know that we may not fully understand, but we can empathize and we can help get them some help.
Well said. Dr. Steen?
Yeah, El Paso County has one of the highest suicide rates in the state of Colorado. So we, as a district, have really spent a lot of time working with the health department, child fatality review team in our county and whatnot, of looking at prevention efforts. And so when teachers say to you, I can't teach because my kids are suffering from issues and we need to do something about it. And when kids identify that they're suffering, as many of the kids earlier noted, that they have issues and that they need to deal with those issues in order to be able to access the curriculum, you have to pay attention. And so many of the things that we have done have been teacher and student-led, which is a really wonderful way to make a difference, particularly when it comes to training around mental health first aid. That kids really took that one on and have done wonderful things at our high school with that.
Glad to hear that. Jessica?
One thing to add is noticing the trend towards, once students are getting into high school, we're seeing more and more depression and anxiety on a larger scale, and looking at the front end of that and saying, we can do some prevention work. We can also do some skill development and skill acquisition work, looking at what colleges are asking for, what our community and what our job placements are asking for. They're asking for people to be able to work together. They're asking for interpersonal skills. They're asking for social emotional development, and we're not providing that quite yet. So really looking at how do we do that and hold that as high as an academic skill or standard.
Thanks, Jessica. And Ms. Hudak, what made you realize that supporting mental health was so important for your association?
Well, we've recognized it from the very beginning, because our basic purposes, one of them is to promote the welfare of children and youth, and the other is to advocate for laws that further the education, physical and mental health, welfare and safety of all children and youth. So it's been, our association began in 1897, And all along, these have been a couple of our purposes. But we only in the last decade created the Health, Wellness, and Safety Committee, and that was in response to the alarmingly high suicide rate of children and youth in Colorado.
My next question for everyone, because we know that schools certainly cannot do this alone. This is really a community issue that we are talking about here today. So I want to ask, what kind of community partners is your school or your association working with to really help?
I'll start again, I guess. Before we jump off of there, Jordan, I would like to add that, you know, we're also realizing that we need to pay pretty close attention to our educators as well, particularly in these times, to make sure they have the types of supports they need, because there's an additional amount of pressure and anxiety that comes with them essentially being on the front lines. And so we're trying to be aware of that as well. But in terms of partners, we'll partner with anybody because we need help and we're not afraid to ask for it. But for us, we've been working with Centennial Mental Health, our Centennial BOCES, our community college, the Morgan Community College, Northeast Colorado Health Department, obviously you all. And then we've also been very fortunate that we've had some local alum that have come back wanting to serve in our community. And so we've been fortunate to be able to actually have a number of those people come back after being trained as psychologists and psychiatrists and social workers that actually are able to assist us as well. So we're looking for any help that's out there and eager to partner and write grants and do whatever we can to help fund all these high needs.
All right, so anyone who has joined this call that's interested, hit Dr. Wilson up. Dr. Steen, if you don't mind going next.
Sure. And I spoke a little bit about being part of different coalitions in the city, but we do have a very, very strong relationship with our local behavioral health care provider, which is Aspen Point in our community. We have therapists that come go to our schools and participate and whatnot. I think what's important is that I agree with Dr. Wilson, we'll take anything, but we really need to make this a community thing. One of the things that the El Paso County is doing with respect to this is really working on different subgroups in the community and really providing training to all community members. I think that the more we open this up, the more forums we have, the more we can talk about this, the less stigma is going to happen, and then we can continue to form these coalitions. But yes, I have the privilege of serving on the Colorado Commission for Suicide Prevention, and so I think that just the effort, the tireless work, and the value that we have for this is really important in our community.
And Jessica, my question then to you, same one. Who are you guys partnering with that you find really helpful?
One partnership that we found that's really supportive is our we have an online referral system, basically. So we worked with our community partners to develop that. And what that is, instead of when a student or a family member is in crisis, giving them a list of providers and resources and then asking them to kind of do the legwork to figure out where to go and how to get support, we sit down with them. We have our community partners as part of our referral system. That includes like Children's Hospital, their pediatric mental health unit, Aurora Mental Health, Health One, Highlands Behavioral Health Center, some other places. And we go through what those resources are, what insurance do they take, what kinds of services and supports they offer, and the family can choose whether they want that support or not. And then if they do, we fill out a form. The minute we hit send, that goes out to our community partner who calls to do an intake. So we work strategically with them. Also with our suicide assessments or threat assessments, if we have the need to transport from our care to a higher level of care, we communicate with them directly and provide the input from the suicide risk assessment, the acute suicide risk assessment. And then after they get a consent, they report back to us what's happened. And that's also very helpful on the weekends when we're not the ones supporting or sending. So that's very helpful just to keep everybody in the loop. We design it together. The resources have been there's input from all of our community providers. And we found that we've gone from about 200 referrals and connected support to over 1,000 over the course of the 3 years. Also, when we run into a problem, then we're able to reach out to our community partners. So with Aurora Mental Health, they have what's called a Connect to Care clinic. So you go into the clinic, you can have an intake at any time, but you could wait for 3 hours with your family together, waiting for the intake to happen. So we were able to work with Aurora Mental Health and get an intake coordinator. So that intake coordinator will do an intake for any APS student or family member anywhere. So they can do that online. They can go to the home. When it's not a pandemic, they can go to the schools or meet in the community. So our families can kind of bypass that. And that really shot up our connections by about 300 this last year.
Yeah, you got to add that tagline of when we're not in a pandemic to almost anything we say anymore. Jessica, thank you for that. Ms. Hudak, what about the Colorado PTA?
Well, we're a statewide organization, so I can't give you the list of all the community groups that our local PTA units collaborate with, but the state PTA works with Mental Health Colorado and the Suicide Prevention Coalition and the School Safety Resource Center, because we do believe that school safety, it may seem like a side issue, but it really has a lot to do with students' mental and behavioral health, keeping schools safe.
And then I have one final question for everyone, and so I don't leave you guys lingering in an awkward pause. Dr. Wilson, we will start with you again on this one. What is the most important thing that you want us here on this call today to take away, and how can we as attendees really help and support your mission?
I think the biggest thing is that mental health is a serious issue, and it has been for some time, and we're doing better at acknowledging it, and now we have to be more ready to support it. It's one thing to eliminate some stigmas, but we also have to have the resources, and those resources cost money. It's just that simple. And if we don't have the resources that we can access, and families don't have access to that, students don't have access to that, then we're not a whole lot better off than if we just didn't acknowledge it in the first place. So it's a monumental task. We're making progress. We need to keep making progress, and that is to provide families and students resources without major hurdles or having to drive 45 minutes to get to an appointment or whatever it might be. We need to be able to bring those services as close to the issue as possible.
Even during a pandemic, right, Dr. Wilson?
Well, yeah, and to some degree, I think that's opened some additional doors in terms of how that delivery can take place. But there's some additional hurdles that have to be, cleared in that regard too. Just got to keep working at it.
Absolutely, Dr. Wilson. Thank you. I like the order so much, so we'll keep it going. Dr. Steen.
Great. I think that it's important to recognize the different initiatives and efforts that are happening in different organizations, particularly in public ed. There's sometimes an assumption that schools aren't doing enough. And as you can tell from the presenters, that there's quite a bit of initiatives happening. But as Dr. Wilson said, those things need to continue to be funded. They continue to need to be valued by support of education, by community and whatnot. And I do think, although the accessibility to mental health services has certainly progressed exponentially in the last few years, we need more accessibility, more ways of getting families connected without those barriers of insurance and whatnot. We need to be able to do that. We need to tear down those walls. And so I'm really proud of our efforts, and I'm really look forward to continue to do more for families. Thank you.
No, thank you, Dr. Steen. Your voice is extremely important on this panel this morning. Thank you so much. How about Jessica?
I would just point towards the wellness of our staff and the people who are providing the support we're talking about to students, especially now with the weight of the economy riding on teachers, the weight of, social issues on the shoulders of teachers and staff, and the fear that they're going through and anxiety that they may be experiencing due to the pandemic themselves. Really making sure that we're asking ourselves the question, every time we're thinking about a student's mental health, how are my staff doing and how can I support them as well? And really focusing on the wellness of everyone.
Such a good point. We can't help anybody else if we don't help the people trying to help the people. So that's an extremely important point. Jessica, thank you for that. Ms. Hudak, your closing thoughts.
Well, I'm glad to hear that people talked about getting parents and families connected. And PTA is the best way to help them do that. Anybody can join PTA, and if you want to create one in your school, it's pretty easy and it isn't very costly at all. So you can go to copta.org and get connected with somebody. We need your help to join us in advocacy. We advocate for resources, especially school funding. That is one of our strongest points of advocacy. We are not going to provide the kind of staff and training that educators need and students need unless we have adequate school funding. We are not going to be able to reach out to parents and families unless we have some kind of network, and PTA provides that network. You can also just go to our website and find a lot of resources there.
Oh, wonderful. All right. What is your website, by the way, if you don't mind just throwing it out there?
copta.org. And then there's the national PTA, just pta.org. Both websites have a tremendous amount of resources and lists of things that we can get people involved with.
Gotcha. Ms. Hudak, thank you so much for that. Well, for every attendee here on this call, you can see we clearly have some really incredible people on the front lines for more and better access to mental health care across our state. I want to thank all of our panelists again for being here today. Soon we're going to hear from Attorney General Phil Weiser, who has shown an outstanding dedication for mental health across our state. But first, I want to send it back to the people that we most want to hear from, which is Colorado's youth.
My name is Elijah Lara. I live in Brush, Colorado. Mental health matters to me because when your mental health suffers, it can become hard to enjoy life. You may start to feel run down, both mentally and physically. Many of these changes can make it harder to enjoy a balanced and rewarding life. Everyone can benefit from learning how to enhance and protest their mental health.
If you're feeling nervous, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to tell you. Just like tell an adult. Why not do that? That does it because that does the trick. 1, 2, 3, that does the trick.
Now, not everyone has mental illness. Not everyone has obsessive compulsive disorder. But we all have mental health. And in order to function and live, we need to take care of that mental health, whether we have mental illness or not.
Without going into it much, I've needed that help before. Yes, it was harder to get it, but I got it, and I feel better than I ever have before, and everyone should feel as good as I do.
Why mental health matters to me is because the feelings are important inside you. It's not the things you do that count. It's the heart that counts. The heart inside is what counts. Don't be afraid to let that feeling show. Just do it.
Thank you so much, Jordan, and thank you, our colleagues and panelists from the school districts and the PTA. And thanks especially to all the young Coloradans who shared their perspectives. At every opportunity, our Attorney General, Phil Weiser, renews his commitment to enforcing the state's parity laws, to hold insurers accountable to Coloradans for the health care that they are guaranteed by law. Attorney General Phil Weiser was unable to be with us live today, but he has shared a video with us. let's turn it over for a word from Attorney General Weiser.
Here in Colorado, we're here for one another. We're here for our kids. Mental Health Colorado is all about that spirit. And I'm honored to be a partner, to be a supporter, because our kids face a crisis. Between 12 and 24-year-olds of age, the #1 cause of death is suicide. And part of the problem is there's a stigma out there. People are afraid to talk about their suffering. And during this period of COVID-19, things are worse. People are more isolated. Substance abuse is up. Depression and anxiety is up. We can do something about it. There are resources available, and Mental Health Colorado is a great advocate. And we're working through our program, Safe to Tell, to get the word out that we need to talk about mental health issues. We need to ask each other, are we okay? That spirit is one that we can pioneer here in Colorado, and we're honored to support programs across Colorado. Programs like Sources of Strength that supports teenagers talking to each other. That conversation can lead to interventions when necessary. When it's a matter of life and death in some cases, Safe to Tell will work with behavioral health partners, with schools, and when necessary with law enforcement partners to help save lives and address, for us, what is the #1 cause of death. So we can be in this work together. We can help change our culture, address the stigma, but that's by being involved. And that's why the leadership that Vincent brings to Mental Health Colorado is so important, because he's going to work with us, work with law enforcement, the criminal justice system, our school system, so that we're doing the best we can to avoid using criminal justice when we're facing mental health or substance abuse issues. To help create a language that people can understand about how we talk about mental illness as an illness. To stand up for a parity rule that means for all insurers out there, you've got to provide mental health care treatment to the same degree as physical health care. We've got a lot of work to do, and here in Colorado, with the leadership of Mental Health Colorado, we'll do that work together. Here in Colorado, we're here for one another. We're here for our kids.
And that's just going to be technology sometimes in 2020. You just play it over, but that's not important. What's important is what Attorney General Phil Weiser was saying there. And there's a lot of different parts for everybody who is on this call. There's some things that we can't personally and alone do. It's going to take a big network of us. But I think one thing that he was really hitting on, which I hope we all kind of are taking time, and I want to go back to a little bit of what Jessica was saying, is that we've got to be able to pour into each other so that we can expand that help for everybody else. I mean, we can at least be help people access that mental health care if, you know, as we work together to broaden those networks. I don't think it'll ever not be a chilling statistic to hear how prevalent suicide is among people ages 12 to 24. When you think about that, I don't think there's, and I can't see everybody, but I'm going to guess there's not a whole lot of people on this call who are ages 12 to 24. So we're talking about people well before our, you know, our ages, and think about what you were like at that age. There certainly is that stigma, and the #1 thing that we can do is what we're doing right now. It's so important. We can talk about it, and I hope we're all checking in with each other, and maybe you meet some people who are on this call as well, and you kind of become strength for everybody else. That is enough of me babbling and ad-libbing. You do not want to hear from me. Let's get back once again to the final message from the people that we are here to talk about, which is, again, the Colorado youth themselves.
We don't hesitate to say that we're going to the doctor because we have an injury or a physical illness. So why is it so different for me to say that I go to talk therapy twice a month? With all the pressures that we have in our busy everyday lives, sometimes you just need someone to talk to.
Hi, I'm Camille. And I'm Sydney. And we are here in beautiful Salida, Colorado. There's a lot to do outdoors, and we know that our physical health relates to our mental health. And we know that mental health is related to our communities and our families.
Hi, my name's Aiden, and I'm here to tell you why I think mental health awareness is important. Everyone has mental health. Whoever's seeing this, me, and it's who you are, it's your well-being. Sometimes you don't have the best mental health and you can't be the best you can be.
And also, you can say important stuff like, how are you feeling? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling funny? Are you feeling happy? Or are you feeling angry? Or are you feeling noxious?
Noxious? Anxious?
I mean anxious.
Hi, my name is Kenzie. Mental health matters to me because my life is full of pressures and expectations. I feel the pressure to constantly get straight A's and always be happy. Students are faced with worries about cyberbullying, school shootings, college, and careers. It can cause a lot of anxiety.
And also, it also matters to me because I would like to be smart, and being mentally healthy would help me be more successful as an adult.
Well, it matters to me because it was something that I struggled with for a really long time to be able to talk about, and at the end of the day, you really only have yourself, and if you are not mentally healthy and happy, you can't really do anything because you are so important. And it took me a long time to kind of learn that, but yeah.
Thank you. Thank you again, Jordan, so much for your support and for your important journalism. Thanks again to our panelists. And for all of you who've joined us today, Mental Health Colorado, we're your voice for healthier minds across the lifespan, and we count on you. It's so important that we prioritize a strong start for all children in Colorado. Our future depends on it. There are 3 things that you can do today to help. First, you can give. For more than 65 years, Mental Health Colorado has led the charge to promote mental wellness, end shame and discrimination, and ensure equitable access to mental health and substance use care. It's life-changing work, and your contribution makes it possible. Give today by visiting mentalhealthcolorado.org/donate. Second, you can join your voice with ours by joining our Brainwave. The Brainwave is Mental Health Colorado's statewide network of volunteer advocates. Brainwave members help dismantle barriers to care that Coloradans face by sharing their lived experience with lawmakers, the media, and community partners. As a Brainwave member, your voice shapes public policy and public opinion. Join at mentalhealthcolorado.org/jointhewave. And third, you can do something about your own mental health. Taking a screening is one of the quickest and easiest ways to assess your own mental health concerns. You can take a free confidential screening today at mentalhealthcolorado.org/screenings. Those that registered for the event will receive an email with these action items. If you didn't register and you're joining by Facebook or YouTube, all of this information is available at mentalhealthcolorado.org. We all have a role to play in improving the mental health of our community. Thank you so much for being here today, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good weekend.